Greetings everyone, my name is Guy Dauncey and this is the annual general meeting of the Yellow Point Ecological Society. I'm going to share the agenda with you right now because that'll make life easier for all of us. And then we can roll right into this and I'll show you what's happening. So we have the agenda with some nice official stuff at the beginning. The call to order, the President's report. It's not a slideshow, though it says it is. The Treasurer's report, election of directors, and then we're going to announce the winner of our Yes Nature photo contest. And then we have Briony Penn as our guest speaker. And I think that'll be before 7:45. So I'm going to stop sharing and click this and click that and find our annual report and just speak it because it's going to be easier that way. Oh my goodness. And if you hang on, I've got some more people to admit here. So hang on, I'm premature on myself. I've got to go back to the agenda because we have all that stuff to do beforehand. We have to establish quorum, 10%. I got to share that agenda again. This is wonderfully disorganized. You'll enjoy this Yellow Point style. Call to order, establish quorum. Do we have 10% of our 34 voting members present, which is 3.5? And the answer is yes, we do. Appoint a minute taker. Pamela has offered to do the minutes. When we come to voting, members can vote. Anyone who has made a contribution financially to Yes within the last year is a member. We're going to use chat for voting. So if you're in favor of something, post nothing at all. If you're against it, use the chat room. Can I have a motion to approve this agenda? Moved by someone. And Pamela, you've got to catch who's, so moved by Nikki. And I can't see all the images here. And seconded by Carolyn. You okay, Pam, with this? Pamela, you need to unmute yourself so that I'm on board with you. Okay, she's holding it. And then we have to share the minutes from the 2019 AGM. Oh my goodness, I wish I was better organized. I shall stop share and start share again. I've never done an AGM in this manner before. So that's my excuse. That's the minutes from our 2019 AGM, call to order, move through the minutes, Treasurer's report, President's report, election of new directors. Have a quick scan of that, and then we have a motion to approve these minutes. Hands up when you think, oh, I can expand, I can see you all. Hands up when you saw Priscilla's hands up, we're all good. Okay, I'm going to admit someone new and stop sharing and go back to the other share. I should have put that in the slideshow, not efficient here. I need to go, patience with me here. Sorry about this, there we are, I've lost the slideshow. And share again. Right, so can we have a motion to approve the minutes from someone? We're looking for a hand up in the air. Ab Barry has a motion to approve the minutes and someone to second the minutes. Bill Carter has got a motion to second the minutes. Anyone opposed? Good. That's all done, that bit. Did you catch all that, Pam? Okay, now I'm going to stop sharing and go straight to the President's annual report here. And so, what a year. During the summer, we were able to hold our socially distanced board meetings in one of our board members' gardens, but otherwise, like everyone, we've migrated to Zoom, where the phrase of the year is surely, you're on mute. Our passion to protect and restore nature has not been on mute, however. Our mailing list now has 287 members. Our Facebook group has 297 members. And our website had 30,000 views in 2020.
Slow down, Guy.
Sorry?
Slow down a little bit. You're talking so fast.
I always talk fast. 20,000 were for the page on common yard birds on Eastern Vancouver Island, created by Ian Riley. And 10,000 were for all the other pages put together, led by the Yellow Point Trail page with over 2,000 views. Earlier in the year, we announced and launched our Yes Nature photo contest, the winner of which we will announce following the AGM. We also continue to offer community meetings, moving to Zoom in March. In January, we had an evening to prepare for the new and improved modernized official community plan for the CVRD, on which we're awaiting news of the next steps from the CVRD. We want to engage productively and find ways to ensure that the protection of nature is included. In February, we explored the potential for environmental development permit areas as one possible way to protect the forest, with guest speakers Peter Grove, a Salt Spring Islands Trust trustee, who's made it his #1 commitment to get a DPA crafted to protect the forest, and Marilyn Palmer from North Couchon, an architect and community leader who seeks greater collaboration to protect our landscapes, forests, got someone to admit that, forests and watersheds. In May, Jane Alcock-White, who's with us tonight, spoke about cultivating a relationship with nature, sharing her knowledge of the benefits of nature immersion, plant communication, and how some medicinal nature plants can reduce stress and anxiety. In July, Nikki Wright gave a presentation on the importance of eelgrass in the ocean, the various ways in which it's damaged and destroyed, and the efforts that she and her team at Sea Change Marine Conservation Society have been making to restore it. In November, we held a Zoom community meeting with Elka Wind, when she shared her experience on why landscape context matters in wetland conservation, with a special focus on toads and their migration patterns between their wetland breeding areas and their winter hibernaculums, which is a new word, we all that. In November, we also hosted a candidates forum for the Area H election, providing the wider community with an opportunity to hear from our 2 candidates, Ben Martman and Murray McNabb, and to ask them questions. The election was won 2 weeks later by Ben Martman by the narrow margin of 8 votes. In December, we held a Zoom community meeting where the lawyer Ruben Tillman presented his thoughts on how can we protect the forest on private land. Ruben works with the Environmental Law Centre at UVic and the Raincoast Conservation Foundation to write a recent report on legal measures to protect the Gulf Islands coastal Douglas fir zone. Throughout the year, we've been working on 2 big projects. The first is researching and writing a big handbook titled The Nature of Yellow Point, a Guide for Landowners, led by Priscilla, who's really shown a great leadership in getting this thing going for us. This is a major undertaking with 45 2- to 4-page chapters. And for each chapter, one of us has taken the lead, researching and writing it, followed by review, more review, then layout and design. And we hope it'll be published sometime during 2021. Our second big project is our proposal for a Yellow Point Trail, a safe, separated, multi-purpose trail all the way around Yellow Point Road from Chuckwagon to Cedar. During the summer, Pamela Walker, one of our YES directors, dreamed up an imaginative way to get people talking, gathering old bikes, painting them yellow and hanging them around the route of the proposed trail. And she's going to give us a little 5-minute piece on this shortly. This revealed a huge level of local support, including from local businesses. Combined with a lot of outreach to local politicians and officials, YES has been approved to head up the Joint Management Committee with the RDN, the CVRD and the Ministry of Transportation. Our goal now is to find $28,000 to $40,000 to pay for the feasibility study for the proposed trail. We're seeking volunteers who might be willing to walk 2 kilometers of the trail, making notes on the condition of the land on either side of the road within the public right-of-way. Thanks to all the publicity and the community support, the Ministry of Transportation decided to prioritize adding a paved bike lane to Cedar Road between Code Road and Haslam Road, which is now complete and just waits painting. We have asked if they can extend it up to Cedar, but that'll depend on their next year's budget. And I'll come to you in a minute, Pam. During the summer, we also organized a community broom pull to clear the broom along part of Yellow Point Road and 2 ivy pulls to clear an invasive patch of ivy in the heart of Humour Park, supported by 2 BC Park staff. We also obtained, repotted and sold 200 Douglas fir, tree and cedar seedlings, which are now in the ground, hopefully protected from the deer. And the volunteers in our Yellow Point Trash Challenge have continued to pick up and recycle trash along our local roads. As 2021 begins, we're starting a new project with Carrie Robinson, titled Yellow Point Ecology Mapping, Discovering the Unrecorded Wetlands. Carrie is a GIS master's student at VIU, and her practicum project, for which YES is the sponsor, would involve spatial data analysis and ground truthing to establish the GPS coordinates of local wetlands, doing meetings with landowners who give permission for Carrie to visit their land, the visual identification of flora and fauna, and the potential rollout of a community bioblitz in the spring to identify species at the mapped wetlands sites. This will result in an interactive web map to which landowners and others can contribute, which can also hopefully contribute to the development of the new CVRD OCP. And our year ended with a bulk purchase of 48 copies of Briony Penn's book, A Year on the Wild Side, a West Coast Naturalist Almanac, which we resold into the community, both as a fundraiser for Yes and so that we could share Briony's humorous and deeply informed writing. So that is the end of the AGM report. I need to go back to share the agenda, which I've lost. There we are. Hang on. Share agenda. So before we go to any questions and things, are there any questions anyone would like to share with us? I got a waiting room here as well. Oh my goodness. Any questions anyone would like to share about our annual report before we move to adopt it? Pam, you're muted.
Yes, I'd just like to say that Carrie Lynn, the woman who's doing the VIU GIS report, is in the audience at the moment. So Carrie Lynn, can you just wave so everyone?
Carrie, better than that. Do you want to unmute yourself and just tell people a little about yourself and the project?
Hello, I did not know I was speaking, so.
Oh, life's a surprise.
Surprise! Well, that's okay. I'm pretty good on the fly. So my name is Carrie Robinson. I've lived in the Nanaimo area for a little over a decade. I very much like using the Yellow Point area and Northern Cedar, the boat launches. I like the water out that way. And I started my master's degree in September of this year. And that was all classwork, learning how to use the software up until this point. And starting next week, I'm actually going to be starting the actual beginning of the mapping project, which I'm doing for you guys. And that starts with gathering the data. So it's all computer work for the first month or so. And then in March, I'll be hopefully being out there in the field when the weather turns a little better and doing some actual ground truthing of the sites. And hopefully I see some really interesting creatures and find some beautiful plants and see what I can see. And Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carrie. Any other questions from anyone about the report in general? Just wave your hand. I can see you all unless you're not sharing your screen. Okay, then can we move to adopt the annual report? We need someone to move it and someone to second it. Anyone move that we adopt that? Lynn Burrows is moving that we adopt the annual report. And seconding, anyone? Yes, Kyle Mulligan is offering to second that. All in favor? That means you write nothing in the chat or hands up. There we go, much more fun to wave your hands. All in favor, yay. The annual report is adopted. Now I'm gonna hand over to Pam to do a little brief slideshow about the Yellow Point Trail. And you need to unmute yourself, Pam. And Nikki will share the screen. I need to give you control. There we go.
Hi, thanks everyone. Guy did a very good synopsis of what we have been doing, but so our little slideshow is just kind of just what he said. So that's the last slide. So at the end, we're going to thank you for your support. So hopefully you do support it. Yes, the Yellow Point Trail. I think it was Priscilla who said we should have a place where we can walk our children and bicycle around this area. So we put the yellow bikes up, and then the amazing Take 5 magazine, we managed to get the front page cover of that, and where all was revealed. Why did we put all these bicycles up everywhere, and what did it mean, these yellow bikes? Yes, and as we got 2,000 hits, as Guy said on the Facebook page, what we're looking for is a separated multi-use trail so that people on horseback, bicycles, pushing buggies, your mobile devices, not your phones, but your mobility devices, you can use them on the trail with any luck. The thought would be, if you look at this little map, that it would go around the Cedar Yellow Point area. And then we'd have a little offshoot perhaps going out to the Duke Point Ferry. There's, and then another offshoot on the other end that would lead past the North Oyster Community Center to the Cedar Park and Ride, and then to the Nanaimo Airport, where there is a bus. And next year, there's plans for the CVRD to have a bus stop at the Nanaimo Airport, so one can get not only to Duncan, but also to Nanaimo. There's two other little routes that have been requested, so we've put those on as perhaps extensions. One is down Holden Corso Road. If you can see that little dog leg there, it's very dangerous. So with any luck, we can get some money for there. And the other one is at the Nanaimo Airport. Perhaps we can go behind the Nanaimo Airport, because they've given us permission to use some of their land for such a trail. So we'll see what happens about all of that. So our thought is that our little proposed trail would join up with other, what they call buzzword, active transportation systems. The Great Trail is...
Can I just jump in? You don't need to read through all these. We got a long way to go this evening.
Yes, so it goes everywhere. Top reasons why we want this path is safety for the children. We want an active non-car lifestyle, and we want to be able to connect with our friends and neighbors in the community by walking, not driving. So what we have done, we have set up a joint management committee with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, the RDN and the CVRD. That's because we went to the board of both the RDN and the CVRD, and we got unanimous support for this. So now we're working with MOTI, and we want to, first of all, improve the safety of our roads, and then secondly, to maybe make an off-road trail. We think that this won't cost us anything, because active transportation grants, there's the federal and the provincial government realizing that there's a pandemic going on, and also realizing that people who are out and about are more healthy. There's lots of grants available. But we also have to engage our community, make sure, do people live around this area? Are they interested in giving us some of their frontage? Do they have skills that we need, like surveyors or trucks or secateurs that we can cut the path through ourselves? Do they have equipment for trail building, such as excavators and bobcats? So those are all things that we will be looking in the future for assistance from our community. But in the meantime, we'll continue on working. We're going to get perhaps some volunteers to even walk around the path to see which area we could put a trail on, and which area probably wouldn't be a good idea. Peter Bowen Roberts, who's on, I saw his name tonight, he did do a bit of what they call this ground truthing with he and a pal of his who used to work with MOTI, and they did a GoPro and they went around. So they found some of the difficulties on the route, but we probably have to do a bit more of that. So in conclusion, thank you for your support. If you can support us at all, please get in touch with me or the Ecological Society, or put something in the chat right now. Thanks.
And thanks for your leadership on this, Pam. Without you, this wouldn't be happening at all. So if you'd like to, to do a 2-kilometer stretch, with a friend and walk either side of the road, and we'll have a system for marking how you track whether it's possible or not possible, or whether it's a ditch or a dam. Just let us know in the chat box or send us an email. So now I'm going to hand over to Nikki for the Treasurer's Report and let you share the screen for that. And you're muted. There we go.
There you go. This is the money side of what Guy was saying. So we ended up the year with another 700 extra in the bank, and another, so that's sort of 700 up here. And we've got another 500 coming in January due to activities this year. So we probably this year ended up with about 1,200 extra in the bank. The bulk of our income comes from those members Guy mentioned, the 34 active members. We also had some donations. Amongst those donations is thank you to Bill, who helped fund the shortfall in the prize money for the photos. We brought in some income from the tree sales this year, and from what's coming in January, we made a profit on the trees. The photos, like I say, we only broke even because of the donation. Book sales, we brought in 240 this year, and a bit more came in January, so nearly, Guy's got probably the top of his head, sort of 350 came in on that. And we had some other miscellaneous income. Our expenses, this year we had the admin, we had some leftover admin fees from last year, about 300 expenses this year. What was new this year is we did join the BC Cycle Coalition, who've helped us a lot with the trail. And we had some expenses on tree purchase, broom chipping, and painting yellow bikes. So what's also interesting this year is we pulled in well, they came in January, but we reeled back the bottle deposits that have been, members have been taking bottles to the bottle depot, raising money for us. And hopefully that continues this year as well. And the only other kind of preference, being now we're in COVID and most of our meetings in Zoom, it's great when people pay their membership via e-transfer, because we have very good records, and I'm going to start sending out receipts this year so people know they're members. We do accept membership via PayPal, but they charge us a little bit for that every transfer, so e-transfer is great.
Good. Any questions?
So any questions, as Guy says? Yeah.
About finances? If you stop sharing the screen, I can see everyone, see if hands are going up. Any questions from anyone? Otherwise, can we have a motion to approve the Treasurer's report? I see a hand from Bill Carter, and someone to second that motion to approve Treasurer's report. I see Priscilla. All in favour, wave your hands. Yay, that is approved. And now we have the next item is election of directors, but since all the directors are happy to carry on standing, we have a full board, we don't need a motion to approve anything because we all carry on. So you can all wave your hands just to say thank you to everyone. And we are extending, we have a board of 11 people, and because we're on other volunteers, we're extending it to call ourselves a team. And Jane Mowbray has offered to join our team, which is good. She's in Vancouver tonight. And so there's room for people who really want to get involved with us. We meet every 2 weeks, so wants to join our team, you're very welcome, even if you're not legally on the board. So finally, we need a motion to adjourn the AGM. A motion looking for someone to wave their hands to adjourn the AGM. Priscilla, moved by Priscilla, seconded by Pamela. And move anyone, wave your hand if you want to adjourn the meeting officially.
Guy, one question.
Yes.
Just there's a chat from Marina asking about us emailing out membership reminders.
Yes.
There's one other thing we're planning to do is make it easier for people to join online. So we'll send those reminders out again in February when we've got that online system up and running.
Nikki's bringing the brilliance of spreadsheets and Google Docs and Google everything else to us all. And we're all
I have a daughter.
We're all learning the technology. So right now I'm going to go back to screen share because our next item is our photography contest. So just move that to one side. I'm going to run through the people the photographs that were entered and then reveal the winner. So these, I'll just take them at time. These are the photographs that were submitted. They're all shot in the Yellow Point Cedar area. That's from the top of Aho Road looking east at dawn. That's, hang on, someone else is new to admit that. I'm sorry we don't have music to accompany these. And the winner is, drum roll everyone, Salmonfly Chichada on Oregon Great Flowers by Linda Stevens. So we can all wave our hands and stuff like that. And I'm going to, is Linda still with us? If you'd like to unmute yourself, and I'm going to stop sharing briefly so that we can all, well, I'll leave it up there so that we can, well, Linda, do you want to speak to this? Maybe Linda's not with us still. Maybe not. So there we go. Linda has won our contest. And we will now move on to our guest speaker for the evening, Briony Penn, author of A Year on the Wild Side. She's been shaking and moving things for ages and ages. And before we go into a chat and conversation with Briony, I want to share some of her artwork you may not have seen. She does these mandalas, which are just amazing. This is all her own artwork. It's an ocean-based mandala. And I know if you're like me, you're just feeling jealous with envy at the skills that she got in doing this one. There's a Gary Oak Meadows mandala and a fruit mandala. Doesn't that remind you of summer? And then she does these wonderful community maps. That's on Fulford Harbour on Salt Spring. And the food map of Cowichan Bay. And Boundary Bay, showing 333 species of birds. And this endangered ecosystem, this is a whole sculpture that Briony did that's tucked away in some, she's lost track of where it is, but still, the Salish Sea, May the next. There are words that wrap around the back, which Briony probably tell us. And the small print says Gary Oak Meadows and swamp wetlands. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing now and invite Briony to take the floor. You want to unmute yourself, Briony? And we're just going to have an informal chatter, and anyone can ask questions at any point in this. If you change your view so that you're on speaker, Briony's your mainstream. So Briony, welcome to our AGM, and thanks for joining us from your studio office.
Well, thanks for having me, and I enjoyed hearing about all your amazing activities this year. I was jotting them all down. You guys have been busy, so thank you for all your work.
So tell us about that toilet.
Oh, well, that was done in the year 2000. I haven't seen it for a while. It was done for the millennium, and it was intended to kind of raise people's awareness about the fact that the Salish Sea is somewhat like a toilet. It needs to be flushed, and so what we pour into it. So if you just to kind of give people the sense that our sea is not just something that waste can go, and that our water is precious. So it was quite a large toilet. I mean, it was 3 times the toilet size, and it was done as part of the Atlas of the Salish Sea, and it was a part of a traveling exhibit. And if you looked in the toilet, you would see all the islands. And the toilet seat was the edges of the Salish Sea, Eastern Vancouver Island there, and Vancouver mainland there. And then on the handle it said flushes once annually. And then the toilet water container, I painted all the, really important wetland ecosystems that actually stored and, our cherished water. So it was an art installation.
So I'm just coming from the blue here. Which do you enjoy most, writing or drawing and slashing and painting, doing art?
Well, both. I usually spend my day doing half and half because I like both. And I find that they inform one another.
And when I know you're really hardworking, I mean, the books you've produced, quite apart from the Almanac that we're all enjoying reading, that are really detailed pieces of proper literary and fiction and non-fiction. I mean, what do you do for when you escape into nature for relaxation? Where do you like to go?
Well, I am blessed because I live on Salt Spring Island. I live actually on the land. So I'm the 5th generation to be here of my family, to actually have the privilege of being here. I'm on Wasanich territory, and I know the families from whom their land was never relinquished. So thankfully, my mom, in her foresight, created a covenant over the watershed that I live adjacent to that is now protected for and is also there for, it's Wasanich territory, and it's a ancient village site and burial ground, and it's just this incredible, beautiful, beautiful place. And literally my favorite thing is to walk out my door and I'm suddenly in this land that's been stewarded and continues to be stewarded by Wasanich people. And it's overlooking. I just go out, I row out to Russell Island, which is now part of the national park. That's about 20 minutes row away, and where the big, if any of you have been watching about the clam gardens, the sea gardens, there's very good examples of all the sea gardens all around where I live. So at low tide, it's especially fun to just roam around and pick up some clams and oysters. And
these clam gardens are ancient First Nations clam gardens, right?
Yeah, yep, they're everywhere up the coast. But there's some particularly good examples here where there were very defined walls. The thing that I've really come to understand about the use of the land here for so many thousands of years is that what was in short supply was sunny areas. So what better place to create gardens into the intertidal area, but in the intertidal area using clamshells. So they're not only gardens for sea animals like clams and urchins and many invertebrates, but they're also root gardens. So there's old remnants of root gardens where silverbank clover or fritillarias or camas and all sorts of the root crops, the terrestrial root crops, were harvested. So really there was a lot of rock moving that went on in this really vital area. And I'm lucky enough to, and of course, when my great whatever ancestors came, of course they saw these beautiful cultivated areas and said, oh, I want to live there. So it's no surprise that there was this conflict over where people were wanting to live. And I'm hoping, I really hope that more people will really step on board to support all the, in this area, it's Wasanich, the Wasanich efforts to really, convey the importance of, and I don't have to tell anyone in the Yellow Point society the importance of all these species, but one of the mandalas that you showed was of the 13 moons, which is the 13 months of the year. based on the, every full moon, like tonight. So tonight is the start of Wekis, the month of the tree frog, where we're starting to move into the herring season, and the start of, the big rains might come. Sometimes it's a little bit, we might still be 1 month before Wekis, because we've gone from our weird 12-month calendar, which bears no relation to the natural world. The translation into the Salish 13-month year sometimes shifts. But anyway, that particular wheel was worked on with all the elders, and there's just stories all through it about which species were, indicators of each month. Yeah, thanks, Guy. So you'll see kind of Wekis, and the Wekis means tree frog, and you can see the little tree frog that is sitting on the Douglas fir branch. And, this is a great time to, this is when the herring started arriving, and you can see the little.
There you are, 1:30 to 2 o'clock, the tree frog.
Yes, right there. And you can see the herring bone right next to the plum, this plum, June plum it's called now. And there's every one of these species has a story connected to the month. So this was made with about 5 or 6 elders from the Wasanich nations, and just recording all the names of the species, the uses, the arrivals of things like when Swainson's thrush, Wachwellis, arrives, then the salmonberry are starting.
Tell us where in the clock. We're down at 7.
And we're down at Penawen, which is May, which is about 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay,
there's the beautiful blue egg of the Swainson's thrush, and is the sound that ripens the salmon berries. So these are all, everything's kind of got these stories around it. And if you look at, say, 7 o'clock in July, the halfway up Nequimuxin, that's the oyster catcher, the red beak. The Nequimuxin is there's a story about that, because during the making of this, I would go out and get oysters for the elders, and because it was during this time of year in January, I'd have to wade out in the cold water during the day because there was no low tides during the day, and I would wade out and get oysters, but my legs would be very pink when they came back, and so my nickname amongst the elders is Nequimuxin, oyster catcher, because I would go get oysters for them and I would come back with pink legs.
Tell us more about this calendar. This is just such fun.
Well, there's so much to tell. One of the lovely things that I think is, if you look at the names of each of them, say July is Senhenin. That's the month of the pink salmon. That's the month when the pink salmon are going to be turning up. And if June is Senteki, that's the month of the sockeye are going to turn up. Moon of the camas, Penawen, which is May. And so each one of those months, you knew what month it was, because, well, sure enough, there's, the camas is blooming in May, and the sockeye are arriving in June, and so every one of those months made so much sense. I was in fact talking with my partner about this today. Is like, July has no meaning to anybody. It's named after a Julius Caesar, and Augustus Caesar, and Mars is the god of war. I mean, for March. So what is that? What's our connection to these things? Nothing. And whereas these months are so real, like when I hear the first tree frog and they start croaking, it's Wekis. And so we can all start listening for the first songs of Wekis on the first rainy night. First warm rainy night in the next 30 days, we'll probably hear our first little, in fact, I've already heard the first Wekis. So
We've heard them locally here. Briony, is this available as a poster?
it is the property of the Sayote Nation, and I think at some stage they might make it available. I think right now I'm not sure. So, but they are on various signs around Wasanich
So
territory.
this is Adam Olson's Sawote. He's Sawote, isn't he?
Yes,
So
Adam's got one of these in his office.
because to have that available as a poster around the place would be just wonderful.
Yes. So it's, I think that might happen if people phone the office, they might find out if that's going to happen. There's certainly,
If the Sawote needed $1,000 to print some, I'm sure we could all find that together between us and make it happen, help them make it happen.
yeah, well, why don't you suggest it? I did print some, and I donated it to the Language Society. So we've done it in a few instances where I've had sales and I've sold them and then donated it back to the Language Society, because there's a wonderful new dictionary that's been come out on the Centrothan language. And if any of you are interested in getting hold of it, it is so interesting because all the animals and plants of Saanich are in it, and just to see these beautiful names like Nequimuksin, which is, you know, the long orange nose, but some of them are so onomatopoeic, or, you know, there's just these beautiful names, and the language is just an incredible language. There's kind of like 300 words for relationship. How can we work together, you know?
So if anyone has questions, just post them in the chat room, and this is your chance to have a chatter with with Briony. Briony, I know that you also write a column for Focus magazine every month, where you express some of your political insights and your frustrations with things that are not happening. Want to speak to that?
Yeah, where do you start? I'm sure many of you are sharing the same frustrations, in that we all know the problems and there's not enough action happening fast enough. Although I think there are some signs that maybe we're beginning to reach a tipping point. I'm certainly more hopeful now that there's some hints coming out of Washington, which hopefully will push Ottawa. I'd say one of my biggest frustrations, if there's a take-home story for everyone at Yellow Point, and all your good work, you no doubt have heard Nikki write and her amazing work over the last 30 years to try and restore eelgrass. And there's really nothing that Nikki doesn't know about eelgrass, but also everything else up the food chain. She is somebody that really understands what's important here. And
Nikki gave us a presentation during the year, and people asked about Ladysmith Harbour, and she said, alas, it's just so polluted with coal dust and stuff that there's not much hope for restoration in Ladysmith Harbour.
Oh, yeah. Well, and she knows.
Harbour, it's been thoroughly industrialized, both by coal dust and by the log booms and all the bark that falls off them and falls to the bottom of the ocean, right?
Yeah, we just don't realize, we never did. I mean, it's just taken so long to realize that actually some of these areas, plants are resilient, but only so much. But there still are things we can do. So the thing that I'm really upset about is that we have these incredibly resilient little fish, the herring. And we once had herring so numerous and so proliferate. I don't even know what the word is. Prolific, that's the word. That every single bay at this time of Wexus would be having the first scouts would come into the bay, and they'd check out the bay and check out the eelgrass, and then they would go back out and lead their little families into the bay. And these scouts are well documented. The children, John Elliott talks about Tomosin from the Sartlip, that he would be sent down as a little boy to go and see if the scouts were exploring and investigating the bays. And then the herring would come in for the spawn. And then you would just have this amazing, and those of you who are old timer Yellow Points will remember the proliferation of herring and everything else that rides with them. Well, in Fulford Harbor, we haven't had a herring spawn here since 1983. Parts of Cowichan haven't had a herring spawn since 1930. Victoria Gorge Harbor hasn't had spawns for,
No.
you know,
We
near.
had a herring spawn at Blue Heron Park. I was down there 3 years ago, and there were sea lions out there charging around. Their fishing boats were charging around. The seagulls were charging around. And then 2 months later, you had this mass of tiny herrings, silver things, half an inch long, all over the place.
Yeah. So, and the thing is that if we could just leave them alone for a little while, they would start coming back. But we are still fishing this population down, and it's actually not one population. It's many bay populations. But unfortunately, the entire fleet is owned in some capacity by Jimmy Pattison, and Jimmy Pattison has so many businesses that are dependent upon getting rid of. Even though he owns Canadian Fish Company, he also owns, you know, every logging company and every coal distribution terminal, and so he's really been such a political obstacle to getting a herring restoration program. So if any of you feel inclined, this is the week, this is the time to write to DFO and say, listen to your scientists, not Jimmy Pattison. He's got so much clout in all the committees.
Which of our many environmental nonprofits is leading the charge to protect the herring in British Columbia?
Conservancy Hornby is doing an amazing job. They've basically taken the lead on herring because they're the last place that there's herring left. And they know darn well how important it is, and are trying to bring people to Hornby during the Herring Festival to raise their awareness about just what we've lost. It's only when you see a herring spawn and you realize how vibrant it is that you look out when there is no herring, and it's like the silent spring. So that's my biggest campaign. It has been for 30 years, and I continue to try and work on it.
Share people the connection with the herring to the salmon to the whales.
To the whales, yeah. Without herring, we have no salmon. Without salmon and Chinook especially, we have no orca. And the southern resident orcas are starving to death. And if we do not provide the variety of different herring populations around the Salish Sea, so when these young Chinook come in, they've got a variety of different sized herring to eat through their development, and then upon their return, then we have no hope of keeping Chinook. I mean, it's really simple. When you look at historic levels of herring and historic levels of salmon, it's kind of like, it's not rocket science. It's really simple. And so the eelgrass is important, but so are the herring. And there's one thing that we can really do right now, and that's stop the herring fishery. And every year they take 20% of the population, and the population goes down, and they keep taking 20% until you're taking 20% of nothing. And this year they are taking 20% of virtually nothing. Every single herring population in the whole coast has had to close because they've basically disappeared. And the only thing that stopped them were First Nations basically driving their fishing boats into Jimmy Pattison's seiner fleet and saying, no more. And so that's what I think we've got to do here. Most of the nations in the Salish Sea have shut their territory to his boats, but DFO are blind because they're a captured agency. And this is not news, this is well documented. But until, the other thing we can do is write the Ministry of Fisheries and say, you know, we need to have our scientists independent of industry.
Did the First Nations not also sort of actually hang branches of seaweed in the water to give more space for the herring to spawn on?
Well, the big difference is that the herring fishery for First Nations is largely a no-kill fishery. So exactly that. Hemlock boughs, cedar boughs would be laid in the water in the small bays. The herring come in, they spawn on these boughs. You can harvest some, a little bit, all, and it really has no impact on the overall population because you're not taking away the age classes. You're just taking some of the spawn, and these were all the sort of sustainability practices of traditional harvesting, and that have just been, why would we not do that on the coast? And why would we have these fish boats come in and take, beautiful fish and convert them into food for fish farms? It makes no sense.
Is that what they're using the herring for?
That's one of the main uses: dog food, fertilizer, any kind of protein that can be reduced down to powder and sold as protein around the world. It's very difficult to track. We even tried to track where all this herring was going, but it largely goes into sort of protein pellets that are fed various industrial farming.
So Pam has a very specific question: is when people take seaweed from the beaches for their gardens, that's the dead seaweed, is there any impact on the herring from doing that?
Well, interestingly, yes and no. It's even more important on the sandlands, because in beaches where you've got sort of a gravelly area, you've got the sandlands nesting in these intertidal zones, and the seaweeds and all those little arthropods and invertebrates that live amongst the rotting seaweed are all food for a lot of these schooling fish. So the young will come in, like the young herring will come into these little bays, and they're feeding on these.
So we see that rotten seaweed at low tide, but at high tide, when it's all floating, it becomes food, right?
It's basically food. If you've ever picked up you see how many jumping, we used to call them jumping sand fleas or whatever. People have many different names for all those various invertebrates that live in the tangle of the seaweed. But those are food. Those are food for shorebirds. Those are food for young fish as the tide comes in, and the gravel below is cover for the sand lances that come in and nest in the gravels.
So living on Salt Spring for so long, I would say there's probably more non-profit societies on Salt Spring caring about nature and the environment than ever before. And there's more people coming there to buy a nice big property and do their fancy thing than ever before. How are the two balancing? Do you believe Salt Springs moving towards a greater ecological sustainability or further away from it?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's some signs of hope. All those things are happening. That's true. And as everywhere, we've got a terrible problem for our young people for affordable housing. And so, it just becomes more and more stark that we have our young people can hardly find a place to put their tiny houses, on wheels with a tiny little footprint. And yet we've got these 20,000 square foot mansions on the sea with often absentee landlords, or landowners rather. So we have a problem, that's for sure. I think you mentioned Peter Grove. We've got two great trustees who are working hard to try and address and bring these problems together and get the community to see them as interrelated problems. And one of the things that I'm really hopeful about is that we've got a great transition organization, Transition Salt Spring, who's really had this amazing group of people that have gone out to try and bring the community together, try and identify all these shared issues, whether it's fear of fire during the summer, or drought issues, or affordable housing, the damage to our forests, clear cutting, impacts to the shoreline from inconsiderate shoreline owners, and come up with a integrated climate action plan that tries and has these what they're calling now nature-based solutions. So that what we want to do is try and create on our islands a notion where the polluter has to pay, not just for the more sort of obvious things like the pollution, but the people that are causing all the emissions. And those emissions can be from chopping down our forests and not looking after our plants, which are, after all, the only things that sequester carbon. And using a really integrated climate action plan to also be a biodiversity plan, a water plan, a fire plan, and an affordable housing plan.
Yeah.
And so I'm really inspired by the work that all these community members have done. and they really are trying to tackle this inequity gap too, because if you imagine if tomorrow we created and this affects really also some of the most impoverished people are the First Nations, and it's their land. So what we're trying to do is come up with a policy where if we were to really reward those people that steward the land with the rising price of carbon, because you can chop down a hectare of forest, and all your work to get electric vehicles on the roads or trails or whatever you're doing to try and reduce fossil fuel emissions, you've just released 1,000 tons of carbon dioxide into the air. So we are trying to look at some innovative work that the federal government is starting finally to recognize, which are nature-based solutions to climate change. And we're working on a pilot, and we're hoping if we can start something, then all our neighbors across the shore can latch on to. And it would really be a system that rewards those that steward and penalizes those that destroy.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
So on a different topic, you write these fairly serious books, and you spent, I'd say, several years writing your biography of Waheed, I think that's his name.
That's correct.
Tell us about that book and who he is.
Well, I brought them to show everybody. These are
Hold the Waheed book up slowly, so that give it and then pause it for a while, so on the screen. And you have to speak so they can see you.
Okay, right, here we are. So I'm pretty emotional about this right now because Waheed, Cecil Paul, died 2 months ago. Yeah, almost 2 months ago. And I'm hugely grateful and privileged that we got the books finished before he died. So he saw them, and it's hard to know where to start because the stories that he tells have so many applications to our lives in British Columbia.
Can you give us some background first? Which part of BC does he come from?
Yeah, so I won't even hold up I can even hold I'll hold this little map up. Those of you who are familiar with the coast, the closest town is Kitimat. And so it's up in the north of BC, and just south of Kitimat is a place called the Kitlow. It's the largest unlogged temperate rainforest watershed in the world, over 1 million hectares. And it was the homeland of Cecil Paul Waheed. And this is his story of how he and his community prevented it from being logged, prevented the second Camano expansion to go forward. There's so many aspects to it. They and Cecil's philosophy really was to bring people into what he called his magic canoe, that the pressures on the earth were so great right now that the only way that we are going to be able to tackle some of the pressures are to get into the canoe and paddle together. So regardless of our culture, our skills, we get into the canoe and we work together. And this is one of the teachings of his granny. And what he did in 1990, around 1992, this was the kind of time of the protection of the Kitlow. He really pioneered for so many of us a way of conducting himself and his community in bringing together a gathering of often people at odds with one another in order to bring forward this outcome of protecting the watershed. So he was able to bring people to this decision that were loggers or were working in industry or were steelhead fishermen who normally were very racist and had certain ideas of the role that indigenous fisheries played. So he managed to bring people in of all these incredible different walks of life. He brought people in from all over the world. He brought movie stars, people like, David Suzuki was a very early adopter, and I think David is a friend. And he was able to protect this valley and create this new management concept too, which was really where the Haisla and the Kanaksla were part of the management, not only drawing up a management plan, but being the guardians. And so this guardian program was also happening in Haida Gwaii and with the Geltsuk, and this guardian program really has become a really incredible element of the coast, and has brought livelihoods back to people on the coast, has brought the protection of the coast in, because these are people that are in their territory and they're doing the monitoring and they're and so the Magic Canoe, Stories of the Magic Canoe are Cecil stories, and the second book is a collaboration of Cecil and I, where I take his stories and I give the sort of Western historical background. He wanted a document that could be understood by anybody. And he knew that sometimes his stories, he said, they don't have dates and they don't follow the same chronology as Western stories. So you have an option. You have a Cecil story, who's a master orator and a storyteller. And then you have my Western historical essay, which tracks the actual events and the dates and the times and the documents of what was going on. And the key part of his story is that this is a man that was abducted by the RCMP at the age of 10. He was taken to Alberni Residential School. It was one of the most awful residential schools that was ever documented in court cases. It was called institutionalized pedophilia by the judge. It was, he was finally released, only to become an alcoholic. His family had mostly died, or he was forced into kind of a series the rest of his life of labor in just about every resource industry in northern BC, and then finally returned to the Kittla, where he had been hidden as a child by his grandparents, and coming back to the land restored. He restored his language. He restored his memory of his cultural teachings. And so these are the stories of his life. It's not the stories of the Haisla, it's the stories of his life, which integrate both what was happening during this really tumultuous time of the 20th century, and also his incredible, the contributions of his culture's teaching to how we're going to get ourselves out of the mess we find ourselves in.
So, Briony, if people want to get the book, is it available through local bookshops, or who's the publisher?
Yeah, the publisher is Rocky Mountain Books, and they are available in local bookstores. Please support your local bookstore, and all the proceeds go to Cecil's family. And I think the books have just been nominated for an award, a Northern BC award, and also picked up by the BC Teachers Federation to be the basis for an entire curriculum for K-7.
How does that make you feel?
This is the thing I'm most proud of. It was a 25-year-long project, but I'm pretty happy.
What are you working on now, Briony? You've probably got 10 projects, but what's your leading project at the moment?
I'm working on a really beautiful, I brought it just because I think they're fun. I'm working with a wonderful research group and 3 Indigenous communities up the coast to redesign how people assess what is called cumulative impact. When villages or communities are being asked to assess what is broken country, which is a term I learned from one of the elders, they have to be able to say that we don't want, like, when does the straw break the camel's back? And like you were saying in Ladysmith, there comes a time when you can't restore anything anymore. And so we are reaching this everywhere. So what I'm doing is I'm working with these different scenarios to show what is healthy country and what is broken country and what is country on the verge of being broken. So these are some of the, and this is the way the elders wanted it. They wanted it done through keystone species, cultural keystone species. So the 3, you can see salmon is a cultural keystone, the grizzlies are a cultural keystone. The trees, like old growth, is a cultural keystone. That's one. These are the seabirds, the rhino-auklets, which when they're lots of them, you'll see them with their sand lance and herring. And here's herring and marbled murrelets and crabs and black bear. So these are all cultural keystone species, and these are what the elders are calling healthy ecosystems. So I just brought a few.
Wow, I have someone is in the chat box. We've got some. Kate saying, "Well done, Briony. Very moved and support by buying the books as gifts." Do you? This is said putting a silly commercial hat on, but do you think of releasing some of your work as greetings cards that we can share? Send to each other.
Yeah, actually, I've never had the money to put them in. You know how you have to pay, because it's a big job to distribute and things like that. So I'm thinking that maybe I'll do that in my dotage or something,
Or maybe find someone who can do it as a business project alongside you, so that they do all the work and get 10% of the. But those images are just so lovely. It'd be lovely to be able to send them to people as cards and share them around.
Yeah, I think that's probably, it's something. I'm not very business minded, as you can probably tell, but that would be something that I've certainly got lots of images. No shortage of images, that's for sure.
Carrie's saying, calendar possibilities. So back to the more prosaic level, we have not prosaic, but practical, from David Haley's asking about carbon sequestration and the nature solutions. Do you see the Islands Trust supporting a group certification approach to carbon sequestration as a way to reward stewards of the standing forests?
Yes, I do. And I think we've got to encourage our Islands Trust to be really proactive on it. It might take a lot of, currently, we're in conversation right now. Currently, they don't have the legislative mandate to do it, but that just relies on getting the legislative mandate. I think they need a lot of support. They need to be educated. They need to see how it could work. And that's the kind of thing that I'm working on, because I actually worked in this field for 5 years, and we do have some pilots.
In between Josie Osborne being the Minister of Municipal Affairs and George Hamer from the Sierra Club being the Minister of Environment, you'd have thought this was the perfect time to get this stuff done, because Josie Osborne, comes from the Botanical Centre in Tofino. She's all over this stuff.
I know. One would think they are not given the power. Those particular individuals are not being given the power and the budget to do what we should be doing. I'm afraid that it's the control, and I go back to people like Jimmy Pattison, because the corporate influence in British Columbia cannot be understated. And it's just going to take time in order to shift. It's going to take the price of carbon reaching $150 a ton before we can compete with $800 for a cubic meter, which is the current price on timber right now. It's just really difficult to compete, and you've got very well-oiled, active corporate lobbyists. But the thing that I really strongly believe in this, and this is why, is that when you reward the steward, and when you're using carbon sequestration as the proxy for nature protection, you can allocate a percentage of that to the very nations whose land that we're living on. So it is a way that we can also give back financially and through stewarding our land to the very nations that have lost so much. And so we have to find a way to do it, because we have been trying to convince people through scientific arguments, emotional arguments, philosophical arguments. And you know, Guy, how there is every single solution in the book, but when you are faced with $800 a cubic meter, your neighbor, my neighbor, goes and chops down all their trees.
So Briony, about 15 years ago, you ran to be Member of Parliament for Salish in the Gulf Islands, and you would have won if it wasn't for a bit of a skullduggery by the Conservatives. Looking back, do you think you would have achieved more as a Member of Parliament with the Liberal Party, or through all the work you've done since when you're not an MP?
Oh, I think I mean, I think that it's sometimes easier. I would have just been a backbencher with no power, honestly. I would have been the last person that would have ever obtained any power, because I was not very good at understanding the political machinations of political operatives and everything else. So I think, yeah, I think where I feel I can contribute is bringing voices like Cecil's to the forefront, who are so inspiring, and I really encourage people to read these stories. I feel like I can bring ideas and pilots to the forefront. Just to give a quick, very brief, but the Cheakamus Community Forest, which is Whistler Municipality, the Lillooet and the Squamish Nations have a carbon project where they have stopped logging their old growth, and all the carbon revenues go back to stewarding that land. And now there's jobs essentially being stewards for the Lillooet and Squamish. There's some articles out there I'd be happy to share.
Yeah, so
And to me, those are the pilots that, you know, that's what the elders want. They want real meaningful work on the rural areas, and money going back to the rural areas.
yeah.
From Whistler, the people that are paying for it are the people flying in, burning up fossil fuels for their holidays, but the polluter pays, and then the rural people benefit.
So
that is equity.
Yeah, Dave Haling is saying that, and he runs a local forest stewardship acreage around here. He's saying there are efforts in Vermont and Maine to gather private landowners together to access the carbon markets, and the municipality of North Cowichan has it as one option for their forest reserve.
That's right. Yeah, I spoke at the big, some of you might have been at the Seven Mountains, and Guy was on that panel. Yes, and Peter Arcee's, I think that discussion is underway. It's going to take time, I think, because again, unless these projects and it's called the family farm. They're all done through what's called it's a voluntary carbon market, and it's done great strides. But really, what we need now is a big federal initiative, because we have to price carbon at the value that it is. If any of you have spent time trying to get a forest established and watch how, you know, like, it takes time to create these beautiful machines called trees that sequester carbon. It takes land, it takes water, it takes time, it takes care, it takes sometimes fencing. We don't have cougar anymore to eat all our deer here on Salt Spring. So all those costs to create these forests to sequester carbon need to come from somewhere, and we can't keep having bake sales to do it.
Let me pick up on that one. That when I was down in Machosen recently, they were beginning to realize with alarm that because there were so many deer and no cougars to eat them, that the deer were eating all of the new tree seedlings that were seeding themselves naturally. And that, you know, in 100 years' time, there will be no new forest coming in. Has Salt Spring got a similar awareness of this problem?
We have a very similar awareness of this problem. And so one of our this is part of actually what the fire marshals identified as our biggest risk. We have lost our understory, we've lost our young trees. And when you lose your understory, you get you lose soil moisture. When you lose soil moisture, you raise your fire risk. So, you know, it's counterintuitive to some people because they've seen these fire smart scenarios drawn up in Alberta or something. But in fact, our fire marshals will tell us the best prevention against wildfires is our native shrubs. And we need
The salal and the Oregon grape and all that stuff.
salal, Oregon grape. These are all fire retardants, and they keep the soil moist. And nurse logs, the best thing you can do. If you ever tried to light a nurse log on fire, you will not succeed. So it's really about restoring our understory, keeping our soil moisture, and that's going to require fencing. So one of the things we really want to do with this carbon project is create incentives for landowners, financial incentives to protect their forest, to get a little bit of funding to fence it, to get the understory back, and then all the other things start unfolding. Saves our water.
What's your stand on actually having an annual cull of the deer with hunting?
We are doing that. And in fact, in our neighborhood, we've invited the nations onto our lands as private landowners to come and hunt. And I have 3 young friends who bring me venison quite regularly.
Yeah, it's the thing called shifting baseline syndrome, that the children grow up with what they think is normal, not realizing what they've lost. And
yeah, I mean, there used to be a beautiful shrub, mock orange, that grew, and even the red flowering currant used to grow all through here in my childhood, and I hardly see them anymore. And it's part of that 13 moon. Once we start losing those shrubs and we lose the understory, we also lose our songbirds and we lose our insects. And so they are all related. And
it's interesting. We were talking we went to the Galiano Conservation Association last year, and they were sharing that on the one hand, they've got people in Galiano who really love the deer and love the animals and don't want to hunt them, but those same people love the songbirds. And when the connection is pointed out that the deer are eating the shrubs that are food for the songbirds, a light switch begins to go on.
Yeah, and I think it's just, the other thing that I try and point out to people is the deer, if they don't have predators, are very unhealthy. They get a liver fluke. Because they're constantly on the same ground, they're not being moved around by predators up and down, and so they get sickly. Their overall fitness declines, and it's not good to have a deer population on a limited area that expanded to such an extent without some kind of population pressure. I mean, it's the same with all of us, right?
But maybe alternatively, I don't know if my tongue is in my cheek for this or not, but maybe have a period of 2 weeks once a year when all the cats and dogs are kept indoors and 10 cougars are released with tracking devices. So you can
oh no, I think I'm all over it. I have a friend on Cortez who is part of the wolf sort of awareness group, and she helps instruct landowners to keep wolf-proof their land so that the wolves can be allowed to run around and keep the deer under control. And I said, we need you to ride with your wolf pack and just be one of those women that runs with wolves and just run them through the island for a couple of weeks every year. And I don't think that it's not a possibility, because it would really move the deer around and into different areas.
So Briony, we need to wind up soon, but I know you're working all the time. Have you, in your many years of working, found a way to get a good balance between nourishing yourself and getting on with your work?
Well, I always tell people I'm very busy, but actually I'm not. I go rowing. I just walk out my door, I go rowing, and I'm in the most beautiful spot in the world. And I hit the jackpot in my life. I'm standing on the shoulders of all my great grannies. My great granny was an artist. My mom was an artist. My granny was an artist. They found this beautiful part of the world, and I'm standing on their shoulders, and I'm utterly grateful. So
how do your children relate to your work?
Well, they're both, can I boast for 5 seconds? My boys have just produced a documentary called Finding Dutchin for the CBC. It's just in its works, and it'll be airing in July. And it's the story of a Dene wildlife photographer called Ryan Dickey with Winterhawk Studios. Go and look at his work. It's fantastic. And so my son's one of them's the cameraman and the other's the producer. And it's the story of Ryan rediscovering his territory, which is the Muskoka. And if any of you don't know the Muskoka, it's an area the size of Ireland that is unroaded and is probably one of the most largest unroaded, most beautiful areas of British Columbia that nobody knows about. And this is the story of Ryan, his friendship with Wayne Sawchuk. You might remember, guys, Wayne Sawchuk, an ex-logger, trapper turned conservationist who's handing over the reins to this young Dene wildlife photographer. And it's the story of their friendship. And like Cecil, it's about the generosity of First Nations who can find forgiveness despite everything we have done, and how we are finally, even old rednecky loggers like Wayne can examine their own lives and see that there's this culture sitting right in front of our noses that we've ignored that has all the answers to our mess.
Right. So again, I think we should wrap up now. If you switch to gallery view, Briony, you can see everyone together. Those who are not on camera, can you open up your cameras? We're going to do something together here. So Tammy, Sarah, Linda, Ken, Sarah, Eric, Nadine, all come online. And you've got a little, in your reactions, you can put the heart button or the wave button. Let's send Briony some real appreciation for all her work.
Thank you. Thank you. This was fun. Thank you for all your work. I get so inspired.
So thank you so much, Briony. We're all really grateful. Hard energy coming your way. Keep it going another day.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you. And this is recorded. We will get it on YouTube shortly. And thanks for everyone for joining us for our AGM, for all the work you're doing, for all the support you give us in the Yellow Point Ecological Society. And enjoy the rest of the evening. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Briony. And congratulations to Linda. And good night, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.